I was 24 years old when my father looked me in the eye, handed my sister the keys to a $250,000 house, and called me the family's worst investment. He didn't whisper it. He didn't wait until the guests had gone home. He stood in the middle of Taylor's backyard, lifted his champagne glass, and smiled like he was about to deliver the greatest financial lesson of his life. Nearly 50 people stopped talking. Family, neighbors, business partners, Taylor's influencer friends. Everyone looked at him. My father built a successful construction company from nothing. Whenever he talked about money, people listened. He slowly placed one hand on Taylor's shoulder. Most parents believe love means treating every child equally. A few guests nodded. Dad smiled. They're wrong. Silence. Good investors don't spread money evenly. They put it where it'll grow. He looked proudly at Taylor. You reward potential. Then, his eyes found mine. And sometimes, you stop wasting money. A few uncomfortable chuckles escaped the crowd. Dad wasn't finished. He took one slow sip of champagne before looking directly into my eyes. Ashley, his smile widened. You were always our family's worst investment. The backyard erupted. Not polite laughter. Real laughter. My Aunt Melissa bent forward, laughing so hard she nearly dropped her wine glass. One of Taylor's friends repeated it under his breath. Worst investment. Then laughed even harder. Even the photographer lowered his camera for a second because he couldn't stop smiling. Taylor slowly lifted the silver key Dad had just placed in her hand. Attached to it was a leather tag engraved with one word. Home. She admired it for a moment before looking at me. I guess Mom and Dad finally admitted which daughter was worth betting on. Another wave of laughter. I didn't say anything. I couldn't. I was still holding the gift I'd spent 3 weekends making after work. A handcrafted walnut recipe box. Mom had once mentioned Taylor wanted something personal for her kitchen. I'd believed it would mean something. Taylor barely glanced at it. Oh. She pointed toward a folding table beside the catering staff. Just leave it with the little gifts. Little gifts. The waiter carefully reached for the box. His face turned red. He looked more embarrassed than I felt. Dad raised his glass again. Here's to smart investments. Every glass in the backyard lifted. Mine stayed exactly where it was, because at that exact moment, I realized something. My father didn't think he'd humiliated me. He genuinely believed he'd complimented himself. 3 months later, the man who proudly called me his worst investment was standing outside my office. His expensive navy suit looked wrinkled. His hair was messy. Dark circles surrounded his eyes. He hadn't looked like that in decades. The receptionist called my extension. Miss Smith, there's a man here insisting he won't leave until he speaks with you. I looked through the glass wall surrounding my office. Dad. He looked smaller, almost fragile. For a second, I considered asking security to escort him out. Instead, I walked downstairs. The moment he saw me, relief flooded his face. Ashley. He took 2 quick steps toward me. We need to talk. I kept walking. He followed. Please, one word. That single word stopped me. Not because I forgave him, because my father had never said it before. Not to me. Ever. I turned slowly. What happened? He swallowed hard. We're losing everything. I didn't answer. He stepped closer. The bank. They're taking the house. Not my apartment. Not my office. Taylor's house. The $250,000 investment. I need your help. I stared at him. 3 months earlier, he'd laughed while 50 people watched him call me a failed investment. Now, he couldn't even look me in the eye. The irony almost made me smile. Instead, I asked the only question that mattered. What happened to your best investment? His face lost what little color it still had. Ashley. This isn't the time. No. I shook my head. I think it finally is. People love saying favoritism is obvious. It isn't. It rarely begins with giant moments. It begins with excuses. tiny decisions, little sacrifices made by one child, so another one never has to sacrifice anything. Growing up, everything inside our house had to make financial sense. Everything. Dad compared schools, neighborhoods, cars, friends, even birthdays. To him, life wasn't measured by happiness, it was measured by return. The first time I heard him call one of us an investment, I was 12. Taylor wanted horseback riding lessons. They were expensive. Mom hesitated. Dad didn't. Confidence pays dividends. She started lessons the following week. The same summer, my dentist told Mom I needed braces. She looked at Dad. He folded the estimate and handed it back to me. You'll appreciate them more if you pay for them yourself. I spent almost 2 years working after school. Taylor won ribbons. I paid for my own teeth. Neither of them ever saw anything unfair about that, because inside our house, those weren't different rules. They were different investments. When Taylor turned 16, Dad surprised her with a brand new SUV. He called it an investment in her future. The year I turned 16, I bought a 12-year-old Honda using money I'd saved from waitressing every weekend. Dad looked at my keys and nodded approvingly. See, responsibility costs nothing. Taylor changed college majors 3 different times. Dad admired her determination. She's finding her passion. I worked 30 hours a week while earning my finance degree. Graduated with honors, never missed a semester. Dad's response? That's what adults are supposed to do. No celebration, no dinner, no congratulations. Achievements weren't special when they came from me. They were expected. Because according to my father, good investments weren't supposed to surprise anyone. They were simply supposed to produce. By 24, I finally believed my life was beginning. I had my first promotion, a decent salary, a small apartment I loved, and after years of saving, enough money for the down payment on my own place. I made one mistake. I told my parents. The following Sunday, Mom invited me to dinner. Just family, she said. It's been too long. For a brief moment, I believed her. Maybe she'd finally realized how distant we'd become. Maybe Dad wanted to apologize for what he'd said at the housewarming. Maybe. I was still naive enough to hope. Taylor was already there when I arrived. She sat at the kitchen island, scrolling through designer furniture on her tablet. The moment she saw me, she smiled. Perfect timing. She turned the screen toward me. What do you think? The picture showed a dining table that probably cost more than my car. It's beautiful. I know. She looked at Mom. I'm thinking of ordering the whole collection. Mom smiled proudly. It'll look perfect in the house. I quietly pulled out my chair. Dad wasn't interested in furniture. He was waiting. The moment everyone sat down, he reached beside his plate and slid a glossy folder across the table. It stopped directly in front of me. I looked down, the same brochure, the same house, the same smiling picture of Taylor standing on the front porch. Only this time, several documents were clipped behind it. What is this? Dad folded his hands. The financing. I frowned. Why are you showing me this? Because you're good with numbers. I slowly opened the folder. Mortgage agreement, home equity loan, construction line of credit, refinancing documents, another loan, then another. The deeper I read, the heavier the folder became. I looked up. You refinanced your own house? Dad nodded. And borrowed against your retirement? Another nod. I turned another page. You opened a home equity line too? Mom answered this time. We had to. I looked back at Dad. Why? He looked almost offended by the question. Because opportunities require commitment. I stared at him. This isn't commitment. This is everything. Taylor rolled her eyes. Oh, don't be dramatic. Dad leaned forward. This house isn't an expense. It's an investment. There was that word again. Investment. I closed the folder. And what about me? Silence. No one answered. I asked again. What about my apartment? Mom reached across the table and gently touched my hand. Ashley, you'll understand one day. I slowly pulled my hand away. No, I understand now. Dad looked at me. Do you? Yes. You believe Taylor deserves a future, and I only deserve to survive. Nobody spoke. Because nobody could deny it, Dad broke the silence. You already have stability. You have a career. You have discipline. You'll always land on your feet. He pointed toward Taylor. She still has unlimited potential. I couldn't help smiling. Not because I agreed, because I'd finally heard him say it out loud. Everything I'd suspected for years was true. According to my father, I had already reached my value. Taylor hadn't. So that's it? I asked quietly. You've already decided who deserves the rest of your life savings? Dad answered without blinking. I already know which investment will multiply. Dinner ended 20 minutes later. Nobody touched dessert. As I grabbed my purse, Mom followed me outside. She wrapped her cardigan tighter against the evening breeze. I know this is difficult. I kept walking toward my car. She hurried beside me. Your father doesn't mean to hurt you. I stopped. No? He just believes in helping the child who needs it most. I looked at her. I needed braces. She looked away. I needed help with college. Nothing. I needed help buying my first home. Still nothing. Finally, she whispered, You didn't need us. There it was, the sentence that had defined my entire life. Not, we couldn't. Not, we were struggling. Simply, you didn't need us. I opened my car door. No, Mom. I learned not to. The official housewarming party happened 2 weeks later. This time, it wasn't just family, neighbors, business clients, local politicians, Taylor's influencer friends, a realtor who kept bragging about the property. More than 60 people walked through the house. Taylor loved every second of it. She gave guided tours like she'd built the place herself. And this is the kitchen, imported marble. And over here, my coffee bar. People admired everything. Every room, every detail, every purchase. She wasn't showing them a house. She was showing them a lifestyle. Eventually, she opened a pair of double doors. And this? She spread both arms dramatically. Is my office. The room was enormous. Custom shelves, designer desk, floor-to-ceiling windows. One of Dad's business partners whistled. Bigger than my office. Taylor laughed. I'll probably never use half the space. Then she looked directly at me. But maybe Ashley could. She spends her whole life staring at spreadsheets anyway. Laughter. Again, I smiled politely. I actually enjoy spreadsheets. She grinned. I know. That's why I never worried about competing with you. Even Dad laughed. Later, everyone gathered outside for a toast. The realtor stood beside Taylor. I've sold houses for 23 years, but I rarely see parents willing to sacrifice this much for one child. Dad proudly wrapped an arm around Taylor. You don't hesitate when you recognize real potential. His eyes shifted toward me. Some investments deserve courage. And others, he shrugged, teach expensive lessons. Another wave of laughter. This time, I laughed too. Just enough for Dad to notice. His smile faded. You think something's funny? I raised my glass. No. I was just wondering. He narrowed his eyes. About what? How long it'll take before this investment starts asking for another one. The backyard became quiet. Taylor forced a laugh. Dad, see? She's jealous. Maybe. 3 months ago, I would have argued. Now, I simply took a sip of water. Because while everyone else had been admiring the house, I'd noticed something no one else had. Near the front entrance, sitting beneath a stack of unopened mail, was an envelope from the bank. Bright orange. Final notice. Most people would have ignored it. I couldn't. Risk analysis had trained my eyes too well. One envelope, one color, one word. Sometimes, that was all it took to predict a collapse. As I drove home that night, I couldn't stop thinking about it. Because beautiful houses didn't usually receive final notices. Monday morning. The boardroom felt different the moment I walked in. Nobody was making coffee. Nobody was checking emails. Every executive was already seated, staring at the same black folder placed in front of them. Across the cover, one sentence was stamped in silver letters. Strictly confidential. The CEO waited until the doors closed before speaking. I'll get straight to the point. Our board unanimously approved an acquisition offer. Silence. Not confusion, shock. For years, rumors had circulated that larger firms wanted to buy us. For years, our answer had always been no. Until now. The chairman slid a document across the table. The transaction is expected to close within 90 days, pending regulatory approval. Questions immediately filled the room. What happens to our divisions? Will there be layoffs? What about executive contracts? The chairman smiled. All existing equity agreements will mature upon closing. My heartbeat slowed, then sped back up. Equity. Years ago, when I'd been promoted to senior risk analyst, human resources had given me two options: a larger salary or a much smaller raise paired with a long-term equity package. Most people took the salary. I took the ownership. Not because I was brilliant, because I believed companies were worth more than paychecks. At the time, Dad had laughed when I told him, "You can't pay bills with imaginary shares." Maybe not, but sometimes imaginary shares became very real. The meeting continued for another hour. Numbers, law firms, tax structures, timelines. I barely heard any of it, because one sentence kept echoing inside my head: your equity will mature. For the first time in years, my future didn't feel like something I was chasing. It felt like something quietly walking toward me. I didn't celebrate. Not yet. Nothing was official. Deals collapsed every day until signatures were on paper. Hope was just another financial risk, so I went back to work, finished 3 reports, answered 17 emails, reviewed 2 investment proposals. By 5:30, my life looked exactly the same, only it wasn't. Mom called before I even reached my car. "Ashley." She sounded unusually cheerful. Whenever my mother sounded cheerful, it usually cost me something. "Hi, Mom. I need the tiniest favor." There it was. "What happened?" "Nothing happened. It's just..." She hesitated. "Taylor's accountant is overwhelmed." I unlocked my car. "And?" "She needs someone to organize her financial records before Friday." I closed my eyes. "You mean she needs me?" Mom laughed softly. "Well, you're so much better with numbers." Funny. When spreadsheets made me boring, nobody needed me. Now they made me useful. "I'm busy." Silence. Then, "It's family." So, you help family." I leaned against the driver's door. "Does family also buy one daughter a $250,000 house and tell the other one to figure life out alone?" She didn't answer. Instead, she tried another approach. "You've always been the responsible one." There it was again. Responsible. Independent. Strong. Those words sounded nice to everyone else. Inside my family, they meant one thing: we're giving everything to Taylor instead. No. What? I said no. Another silence. Longer this time. "I'll tell your father." She hung up. 20 minutes later, my phone rang again. "Dad." I almost ignored it. Instead, I answered. "What?" No greeting, no small talk, no pretending. His voice was already cold. "Your mother tells me you're refusing to help." "I'm refusing to clean up another adult's mess." "It's your sister. It's her mortgage." "Exactly. You understand these things. So should she." He let out a slow breath. "You've changed." "No. I stopped volunteering. You owe this family." I actually laughed. The sound surprised even me. "Oh? I've paid my own tuition, my own car, my own rent." My own insurance. My own life. What exactly do I owe? He didn't hesitate. Gratitude. I frowned. For what? For making you who you are. That sentence stayed with me, not because it made sense, because he actually believed it. Without another word, he hung up. Wednesday evening, someone knocked on my apartment door. 3 sharp knocks. I already knew who it was. Taylor never texted first. She expected doors to open. I pulled it open. She walked inside without waiting to be invited. Designer handbag, perfect makeup, expensive perfume. She stopped in the middle of my living room and slowly looked around. Same old couch. Same bookshelf. Same small dining table. She smiled. I forgot how. She tilted her head. Compact your place is. Translation, small. I closed the door. What do you want? She placed a thick folder on my coffee table. Mortgage statements. Credit cards. Bank notices. Insurance documents. Tax forms. The pile looked like someone had emptied an entire filing cabinet into a box. I need everything organized before Friday. Why Friday? Meeting. With who? The bank. My eyes stayed on the paperwork. There were too many envelopes. Too many balances. Too many payment notices. One document caught my attention. Home equity line of credit. Borrower, Thomas Smith. Another. Borrower, Linda Smith. Another. Cosigner, Taylor Smith. I looked up. Your house isn't paid for. She laughed. Nobody pays cash anymore. I know. But most people also don't refinance their retirement to cover the down payment. For the first time, her smile disappeared. It'll all work out. Will it? She crossed her arms. I didn't come here for a lecture. You came because your accountant quit. She froze. I already had my answer. You looked him up. No. I noticed he isn't listed anywhere on these files. Silence. He walked away, didn't he? She looked toward the window. He wasn't the right fit. Translation. He refused to sign off on something. I quietly closed the folder. I'm not doing it. She blinked. What? I'm not cleaning this up. Her voice sharpened. You're seriously refusing to help your own sister? I'm refusing to become responsible for choices I didn't make. She stared at me for several seconds, then laughed. You really think you're better than me because you work 60 hours a week? No, I think I sleep better. Her smile vanished completely. You've always been jealous. I almost let her walk away with that, almost. Instead, I looked her straight in the eyes. No, I've always been available. You just confused availability with obligation, for the first time since we'd become adults. Taylor didn't have an answer. She grabbed the folder, walked to the door, then stopped. Without turning around, she said quietly, Dad was right. You've become selfish. The apartment fell silent after she left. I looked toward the empty space where the folder had been. One number refused to leave my mind, the balance on the home equity loan. It was far larger than it should have been, far larger than anyone would borrow, just to buy a daughter a house. Something wasn't adding up, and after years of building risk models for a living, I'd learned to trust that feeling. Because behind every financial disaster, there was always one number that everyone else ignored. Monday morning, the orange envelope refused to leave my mind. I wasn't worried because it belonged to Taylor. I was worried because banks didn't send final notices 2 weeks after approving mortgages. Not unless something had already gone wrong. I tried focusing on work. 3 investment proposals, 2 acquisition reports, an executive presentation due before lunch. Normally, numbers quieted my mind. Not today. Every spreadsheet reminded me of Dad's voice. You put money where it'll grow, maybe, unless you borrowed more than you could repay. At 11, my assistant knocked softly. Ashley? I looked up. Your father is online too. I frowned. He said it's urgent. Of course it was. Everything became urgent the moment I stopped saying yes. I picked up the phone. What is it? No greeting. No pretending. Dad sighed. I don't like the way we've been talking. That surprised me. For exactly 1 second, then he continued. Taylor needs you. There it was. Not, I miss you. Not, how are you? Taylor. Always Taylor. What happened? Nothing. I almost laughed. You don't call my office because nothing happened. He lowered his voice. Her financial advisor resigned. I know. Silence. You knew. She came to my apartment. And you still refused? Yes. His breathing became heavier. I don't understand you anymore. No, you just don't control me anymore. Another silence. Then came the sentence I'd heard my entire life. Family takes care of each other. I leaned back in my chair. Interesting. What? I don't remember you saying that when I needed help buying my apartment. His voice hardened instantly. That's different. There it is. What? The double standard. You call it family when Taylor needs something. You call it responsibility when I need something. He didn't answer. Instead, he tried another strategy. You know what your problem is? I smiled. I've heard this speech before. You're keeping score. No, I'm remembering. Click. He hung up. That evening, Taylor posted a new video. Come decorate my dream home with me. Within an hour, it had almost 80,000 views. I watched 30 seconds. Imported furniture, designer lighting, custom wallpaper. She laughed while spinning through the living room. At the end of the video, she looked directly into the camera. My parents always believed in investing in my dreams. She smiled. They knew I'd make them proud. Thousands of comments flooded the screen. Goals. Perfect family. You're so lucky. Then one comment caught my attention. Didn't this house just close? How are you already replacing everything? Taylor deleted it less than a minute later. Wednesday. Mom invited me to lunch. I almost declined. Almost. When I arrived, she was already waiting. She smiled warmly. For anyone watching, she looked like the perfect mother. She ordered my favorite soup before I even sat down. I thought you'd appreciate that. I thanked her. For several minutes, we talked about nothing. The weather, work, traffic. Then, she finally reached into her purse. I need your opinion. She handed me a folder. Not legal documents, furniture invoices, kitchen upgrades, landscaping estimates, a luxury outdoor pool. I stared at the total. Another $93,000. I looked up slowly. Please tell me these aren't approved. Mom hesitated. Taylor wants the house to match her brand. With what money? She smiled nervously. Your father has a plan. That sentence made my stomach sink. What plan? He says opportunities create wealth. No. I closed the folder. Debt creates debt. Mom sighed. You sound exactly like your spreadsheets, and Dad sounds exactly like a gambler. She looked genuinely offended. Don't say that. I'm saying what the bank will. When lunch ended, Mom hugged me. Longer than usual, almost desperately. You know, I still hope you'll change your mind. About what? Helping your sister. I looked at her. Mom, if she can't afford the house she already has, what makes you think she can afford another $90,000 in renovations? She forced a smile. You always expect the worst. No, I just recognize it sooner. Friday afternoon, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. Normally, I ignored those. Something told me not to. Hello? Miss Smith? Yes. My name is Daniel. I'm calling from Greenstone Mortgage. I frowned. I think you have the wrong Ashley Smith. There was a brief pause. I'm sorry. I was trying to reach Taylor Smith. I almost corrected him. Instead, I stayed quiet. He continued. Could you ask her to return our calls? It's regarding her overdue mortgage payment. One sentence. One mistake. One confirmation. My heartbeat slowed. So, the payment is overdue? Another pause. I'm afraid I shouldn't discuss that. He already had. It's important she contacts us today. The line disconnected. I remained frozen. Not because I was surprised. Because I'd been right. The orange envelope. The desperate accountant. The bank meeting. Now the first mortgage payment, was already late, less than a month after moving in. I looked through the glass wall of my office toward the city below. For years, my father had taught everyone that good investors recognized winning opportunities before anyone else. Ironically, I had just recognized the biggest financial disaster of his life. And he still had absolutely no idea it had already begun. I almost called Taylor back, not to warn her, to satisfy my curiosity. Instead, I deleted the number from my recent calls. If she'd spent 24 years ignoring every warning I ever gave, she wasn't about to start listening now. That weekend, Dad invited the entire family to Sunday brunch. The invitation wasn't really an invitation. Attendance was expected. When I arrived, Taylor was already filming another video. She laughed into her phone while walking across the backyard. "My followers have been begging for a full house tour," she spun dramatically. "So today, you finally get one." She noticed me walking through the gate. Without stopping the recording, she smiled. "Oh, my sister's here." She turned the camera toward me. "This is Ashley, our family's financial genius." She laughed. "Unfortunately, being good with numbers doesn't always help your personality." Several of her friends laughed behind the camera. One of them whispered, "That's the famous sister?" Taylor nodded dramatically. "The boring one." I kept walking. Not because I was hurt, because she wanted a reaction. And reactions were content. Dad was standing near the grill, talking to two business partners. The moment he saw me, he waved me over. "Perfect. I was just telling them about you." One of the men smiled politely. "Dad says you're brilliant with investments." Before I could answer, Dad added, "She's excellent at protecting other people's money." He took a sip of his drink. "Not so good at creating it." The two men laughed. I smiled. "Actually, I've done all right." Dad grinned. "You've done comfortable." Taylor walked over carrying her phone. "Dad always says comfortable people stop dreaming." She looked straight at me. "I think that's why Ashley's still renting." Another laugh. Another audience. Another performance. I looked at Taylor. "I'd rather rent the right place than own the wrong one." Her smile faded, only for a second. Then she recovered. "I own a $250,000 house." I nodded. "I know. I've seen the paperwork." The color drained from her face. Very slightly, barely noticeable, but I saw it. Dad didn't. "What paperwork?" Taylor answered too quickly. "Nothing." I looked at both of them. "No, she's right. It's nothing." I picked up my drink. "At least, it will be soon." I walked away before either of them could ask another question. 10 minutes later, Dad cornered me near the patio. "What was that supposed to mean?" "What?" "The paperwork." I shrugged. "I was talking about mortgage documents." His shoulders relaxed. "Oh, you scared Taylor." I noticed. "You shouldn't joke about finances." I almost smiled. "I'm not joking." He frowned. "What does that mean?" "It means, I hope you've built a better emergency fund than Taylor has." His expression hardened. "You've always assumed the worst." "No, I analyze risk." "Same thing." "No, they're opposites." He stared at me, waiting. I simply walked back inside. Lunch was interrupted by the sound of Taylor yelling, "My phone." She stared at the screen. "No." She refreshed an email. Then another, then another. Mom hurried over. "What happened?" Taylor forced a smile. "Nothing." I recognized that word. Nothing. It was becoming the favorite lie in our family. Dad stepped closer. "What is it?" She hesitated. "My partnership." "What partnership?" "The furniture campaign." The brand pulled out. Silence. One of her influencer friends awkwardly looked away. They said, Taylor swallowed. "They're restructuring." Dad immediately placed a hand on her shoulder. "It happens. You'll get another one." She nodded. "Yeah, of course." But she wasn't convincing anyone, especially not herself. Later that afternoon, as everyone talked inside, I stepped onto the back porch. From there, I could see the mailbox, another orange envelope, different logo, different bank, same color, interesting. 1 overdue notice could happen. 2 rarely did. The front door opened behind me. Dad joined me. "You've been acting strange. I've been paying attention." He folded his arms. "You always think you know something everyone else doesn't." "No. I usually just read what's in front of me." He followed my gaze toward the mailbox, then casually walked over and picked up the mail. The orange envelope disappeared beneath the rest before anyone else noticed. He turned back toward me. His smile looked forced this time. "Business?" I nodded. "I'm sure." For the first time, he looked uncomfortable, not guilty, worried, just for a moment. Then it was gone. Monday morning, the acquisition team called another executive meeting. The legal department entered, carrying 3 thick binders. The chairman looked unusually relaxed. "Ladies and gentlemen, we've completed due diligence." A quiet murmur spread through the room. "The closing date has officially been moved forward." "Forward?" someone asked. "How much?" The chairman smiled. 31 days. My pulse quickened. 31 days, not 90, 1 month. Everything I'd worked toward for years was suddenly much closer. The meeting ended. As everyone filed out, the CEO stopped me. "Ashley, I'll need you to stay." I closed the door behind the last executive. He looked at me for several seconds, then smiled. "I hope you didn't make any major financial commitments recently." I frowned. "No." "Good." He slid a confidential document across the desk. "You'll want to keep it that way until this becomes public." I looked down. Estimated equity distribution. My eyes found my name. Then the number beside it. I read it once, then again. Certain I'd misunderstood. I hadn't. For the first time in my entire career, I couldn't think like an analyst, only like a daughter. Because the same father who once laughed while calling me his worst investment was about to discover exactly how expensive that mistake had become. I folded the document, then slid it back across the desk. The CEO smiled. "Not what you were expecting?" I shook my head. "No, it wasn't." "Congratulations, Ashley. You earned every dollar." Every dollar. Those words stayed with me long after I left his office. Not because of the money, because nobody in my family had ever said them to me before. By the time I reached the parking garage, I already had 3 missed calls. "Dad, Dad, Taylor." I sighed. Then drove home. The first voicemail came from Dad. "Ashley, call me. It's important." The second was shorter. "Don't ignore me." The third wasn't even from him, it was Mom. "Sweetheart, please call your father. He's under a lot of stress." Under a lot of stress. That was new. Dad wasn't the type to admit stress. He usually turned it into anger. I waited until the next morning. Then I called. He answered before the first ring finished. "Finally. What happened?" "I need you to meet me." "Why?" "I'll explain when you get here." "No." Silence. "What do you mean, no?" "I mean explain now." His breathing grew heavier. "This isn't a phone conversation." "Then it isn't my problem." "Ashley." His voice dropped. "Stop making everything difficult." I almost laughed. "You taught me that." He frowned. "What?" "You spent 24 years proving that every decision has consequences. So, I'm just letting yours have some." I hung up. He showed up at my apartment that evening, unannounced. Again. I looked through the peephole. For a moment, I considered pretending I wasn't home. Instead, I opened the door. He didn't wait to be invited in. He walked straight to the living room. His eyes immediately scanned the apartment. Same couch, same bookshelf, same dining table. Nothing had changed. He seemed relieved. You haven't moved? No. You still rent? Yes. He nodded slowly. Good. I frowned. Good? It means you're being careful. Interesting. 3 months ago, renting made me a failure. Now, it was responsible. What do you want, Dad? He ignored the question. Instead, he walked toward my bookshelf, still trying to look like the man in control. I've been thinking, that was never a good sign. We've both said things we shouldn't have. No. I meant everything I said. He looked back at me. You always were stubborn. I learned from you. Another silence. Then, he finally admitted why he came. I need someone to review a few financial documents. There it was. Not, how are you? Not, I'm sorry. Documents. What documents? Business loans. I stared at him. Yours. Temporary restructuring. I'll take that as a yes. He placed a folder on my coffee table. Unlike Taylor's, this one was organized, too organized. That immediately worried me. People only became this organized when they were hiding something. I opened the first page, commercial loan. The second, equipment financing. The third, I stopped reading. Very slowly, I looked up. Dad. He swallowed. Yes, you pledged the company. He didn't answer. You used Smith Construction as collateral. Still nothing. I closed the folder. Why? His jaw tightened. It was necessary. No. It was desperate. His eyes narrowed. You don't understand construction. I understand leverage. You've overextended everything. I know exactly what I'm doing. I looked at him for several seconds, then quietly asked, Did you tell Mom? Silence. That was my answer. He reached for the folder. I didn't come here for criticism. No. You came because your accountant already criticized you. His hand froze. You talked to him. I didn't have to. You've replaced 3 accounting firms in 2 years. His expression changed. For the first time, I didn't see confidence. I saw fear. Very small. Very controlled, but real. You've been asking questions. No. I've been connecting answers. He grabbed the folder. I've handled businesses for 30 years. I don't need lectures from my daughter. I nodded. Apparently, you do. He stared at me, longer than usual, almost like he was seeing someone he didn't recognize. Then he quietly asked, When did you become like this? I smiled. The day you taught me life was about investments. Saturday afternoon, Mom invited me over again. This time, there were no guests. Just the 3 of us. She served coffee herself. No maid. No catering. No expensive desserts. Even that felt different. She sat across from me, hands wrapped around her mug. Ashley, I need you to promise me something. I won't promise anything before I hear it. She looked disappointed. If something happens, I want you to protect your father. There it was. Not protect yourself. Not protect your sister. Protect Thomas. What exactly do you think is going to happen? Her fingers tightened around the mug. I don't know, but he's been awake every night. He barely eats. He won't tell me what's wrong. Interesting. So even Mom didn't know. Dad had finally started hiding things from everyone, including the people he'd always protected. Before I could answer, the doorbell rang. Mom frowned. We're not expecting anyone. She opened the front door. A man in a gray suit stood outside, holding a leather portfolio. Mrs. Smith? Yes? I'm looking for Mr. Thomas Smith. My pulse immediately slowed. Banks rarely visited homes. Unless it couldn't wait anymore. The man waited patiently on the front porch. Gray suit. Black leather portfolio. No smile. No introduction beyond his name. I'm Daniel Brooks, Senior Recovery Officer with Greenstone Bank. Recovery. Not customer service. Not mortgage advisor. Recovery. Mom forced a polite smile. I'm sure there's some mistake. I'd prefer discussing it with Mr. Thomas Smith. Dad appeared in the hallway before she finished speaking. For a split second, his face went completely white. Not surprised, terrified. I'll handle it. He stepped outside and quietly closed the front door behind him. Mom looked confused. I wonder what that's about. I didn't answer. Instead, I walked toward the front window, not enough to be obvious. Just enough to see. Dad wasn't talking. He was listening. The banker opened the portfolio, pulled out several documents, pointed to different pages. Dad rubbed both hands across his face, then signed something. Not happily, not willingly, like a man buying time. When the banker finally left, Dad remained standing in the driveway, motionless, watching the car disappear. Mom opened the door. Thomas? He turned around so quickly that he almost looked angry. It's handled. What was it? Business, she frowned. What kind of business? I said it's handled. He walked past both of us without another word. Straight upstairs. The bedroom door slammed. Mom looked at me. He's never like this. No, he wasn't. Because for the first time in his life, someone else was making demands. Dinner was painfully quiet. Taylor spent most of it looking at her phone, refreshing emails, refreshing social media, refreshing her banking app. Every few minutes, she forced another smile, pretending nothing was wrong. Then, her phone buzzed. She looked down. The smile disappeared. What? Dad looked up. What happened? She quickly locked the screen. Nothing. He wasn't convinced. Taylor. It's just another company. What company? She hesitated. They're postponing our campaign. Postponing? Until next quarter. Dad nodded immediately. That's fine. It happens. She looked relieved that he'd accepted the explanation. I didn't. Brands didn't postpone campaigns. They canceled them. They simply chose softer words. After dinner, Taylor cornered me in the kitchen. You've been talking to Dad? No. She crossed her arms. Then why has he been asking questions about my expenses? I have no idea. Don't lie. I'm not. She stepped closer. You've been poisoning him against me. I almost laughed. Taylor, I've spent 24 years watching you do that to me. You don't need my help. Her jaw tightened. You think you're smarter than everyone. No. I just read what people sign before I sign it. She rolled her eyes. There you go again, always acting like you're the only adult in the room. I looked around the kitchen, the imported appliances, the marble countertops, the custom cabinets, then back at her. I'm definitely not the only one. But I might be the only one paying my own bills. Her face hardened instantly. You have no idea what you're talking about. I leaned slightly closer. No? Then tell me something. When was the last time you made a mortgage payment, using your own money? Silence. Not one word. Her breathing became shallow. She knew. I knew, and for the first time, neither of us pretended otherwise. Monday morning, the receptionist called my office. Ashley, your father is here. Again, I looked through the glass wall. He wasn't alone. Mom sat beside him. She looked exhausted. Dark circles. Red eyes. She'd been crying. I walked into the conference room. Nobody spoke for several seconds. Dad finally pushed a folder toward me. I need you to review these. No. Ashley. No. You haven't even looked. I don't need to. His patience finally cracked. You don't know what's inside. I know exactly what's inside. He stared at me. What do you think is inside? Another loan. His eyes widened. Another guarantee. Silence. Another promise that next month everything will be different. Nobody moved. I looked at Mom. You didn't know, did you? She slowly turned toward Dad. What is she talking about? He stayed silent. I asked another question. Did he tell you he borrowed against the company? Mom frowned. Against the company? Dad interrupted immediately. Ashley. No. I wasn't looking at him anymore. I was looking at Mom. Did he tell you he refinanced the house? Her expression changed. I knew about the house. What about the commercial line of credit? She looked back at Dad. What commercial line? Another silence. Longer this time. Then, very quietly, she whispered, Thomas, what did you do? He closed his eyes, just for a second, long enough for all of us to know the answer. He hadn't just hidden debt from the bank. He'd hidden it from his own wife. Mom pushed her chair back. You lied to me. I was protecting you. No. You were protecting yourself. She stood up, hand shaking. How much? He didn't answer. She raised her voice. Thomas, finally, almost in a whisper, he said, more than we can repay. The room fell completely silent. I looked at both of them. For years, my father had taught everyone that successful investors never let emotions cloud their judgment. Now, the man who measured life like a balance sheet couldn't even tell his wife how much money they'd lost, and somehow, I knew this wasn't the worst part. Not even close. Mom didn't speak for almost a minute. She simply stared at Dad, as if she were looking at a stranger. You lied to me. Dad rubbed his temples. I was trying to fix it before you found out. You borrowed against our retirement. Silence. You borrowed against the company. Silence. You refinanced our house. Still nothing. Then, she asked the question that made even Dad hesitate. What else don't I know? He opened his mouth. Nothing came out, because for the first time in his life, there wasn't a version of the truth he could manipulate. There was only the truth. I stood up. This isn't my conversation anymore. Dad looked at me. Ashley. I stopped at the door. What? I still need your help. I almost smiled. You still don't understand. What? You keep asking me to solve problems without admitting you created them. His face hardened. So you're just going to watch your family collapse? I looked at him for several seconds. No. You watched it first. I walked out. Neither of them tried to stop me. Tuesday morning, the acquisition became official. The email arrived at exactly 8:07. Closing approved. I read it twice. Then 3 times. No surprises. No delays. No conditions. Just one sentence. Funds will be distributed within 5 business days. I leaned back in my chair. 20 years. 20 years of working, saving, studying, sacrificing. And somehow, the first person I thought about was Dad. Not because I wanted revenge, because I wondered how long it would take before he found out. It didn't take long. Around noon, my phone buzzed. Taylor. I ignored it. She called again. Then again. Finally, a text. Answer your phone. I didn't. 5 minutes later, she was standing in my office lobby. The receptionist looked apologetic. I'm sorry. She wouldn't leave. Taylor stormed toward me, still wearing sunglasses indoors, still pretending everything was under control. We need to talk. No, you don't have a choice. I actually do. Several employees looked up from their desks. She lowered her voice. What have you been telling Dad? The truth. You've turned him against me. I laughed. That genuinely amused me. I spent 24 years being blamed for everything. You'll have to be more specific. Her jaw tightened. He's questioning every expense, every payment, every decision. I tilted my head. So, he's acting like a financial analyst. This isn't funny. No, it's overdue. She stepped closer. I know what you're doing. I doubt that. You're trying to make me fail. I looked around the office. Half the accounting department had stopped pretending to work. Everyone was listening. I smiled politely. Taylor, if your success depends on everyone lying to you, it was never success. Her face turned bright red. You think you're better than me because you sit behind a desk all day? No, I think I sleep better. She laughed sarcastically. You'll always be jealous. No, I'll always balance my accounts. Several people nearby tried not to smile. She noticed. And for the first time in her life, Taylor became the one being embarrassed in public. She grabbed her purse. This isn't over. No, it isn't. She spun around and walked out. The automatic doors closed behind her. Only then did my receptionist quietly whisper, "Your sister seems intense." I smiled. You have no idea. Thursday afternoon, Dad called again. This time, I answered. What? His voice sounded different, quieter. I need one favor. What kind? I need you to come to the office. No, it isn't about money. I don't believe you. Silence. Then, it isn't, against my better judgment. I agreed. Smith Construction looked different. The receptionist who'd known me since childhood barely smiled. Half the parking lot was empty. Several offices were dark. Dad was waiting inside the conference room. No coffee, no paperwork, just him. He looked older, years older. I wanted to ask you something. What? He studied my face, longer than usual, then asked, Have you heard anything about Carter and Pierce? My company. I kept my expression neutral. No. I heard they're being acquired. I've heard the rumors. He nodded slowly. I met someone yesterday. Who? One of their legal advisors. My heartbeat stayed perfectly calm. He mentioned something interesting. I waited. He said a handful of employees are about to become very wealthy. Silence. Dad leaned forward. You're close to the executive team. I am. He looked directly into my eyes. Tell me honestly, are you one of them? The room became completely silent. For the first time, the man who had spent decades calculating everyone's value was trying to calculate mine. I looked at him, then quietly smiled. I guess you should have invested more carefully. I stood, picked up my purse, and walked toward the door. Behind me, I heard something I'd never expected. Not anger, not arrogance, just one broken sentence. Ashley. He sounded afraid. Really afraid. Because for the first time, he wasn't wondering whether I'd help. He was wondering exactly how much he'd lost by betting on the wrong daughter. I didn't sleep much that night. Not because of Dad. Because the acquisition closed the following morning. 8 years, hundreds of late nights, thousands of spreadsheets, every promotion, every sacrifice, everything came down to one bank transfer. At 9:14 a.m., my phone vibrated. Funds received. I stared at the screen, then locked it again. No celebration, no tears, no dramatic reaction, just relief. For the first time in my adult life, nobody could ever threaten my future again. I spent the afternoon exactly the way I always had, reviewing reports, meeting with clients, approving investment recommendations. Nothing changed, except everything had. Around 5, my phone rang. Unknown number. Hello, Miss Smith? This is Melissa Carter with Horizon Properties. I wanted to let you know the penthouse you toured last month is still available. I'll take it. There was a brief silence. I'm sorry? I said I'll take it. Without another viewing? Yes. We'll prepare the paperwork immediately. Perfect. I ended the call. Simple. No discussion. No financing. No waiting for approval. For years, buying a home had felt impossible. Now, it took less than 30 seconds. The following Saturday, Taylor hosted another live stream. She had no choice. Her engagement numbers had dropped almost 40% in 6 weeks. Sponsors were asking questions. Followers were disappearing. She needed content. She needed attention. She needed people to believe nothing had changed. I watched exactly 2 minutes, long enough to notice the empty shelves behind her, the missing artwork, the missing designer chairs. She'd already started selling things, pretending it was a redesign. The comments noticed. "Where's the marble table? Didn't you just buy new furniture? Thought you loved the old setup." Taylor ignored every question. Then, someone posted another comment. "Didn't your parents refinance their house to buy yours?" The comment disappeared almost instantly. Too late. I'd already seen it. Sunday afternoon, Mom called. Her voice sounded exhausted. "Ashley, I need to ask you something." "What is it? Have you spoken to your father?" "No. He barely sleeps. He barely eats. He keeps disappearing." I stayed quiet. Then she whispered, "I think he's hiding something again." Again. That word hurt more than she realized, because it meant she'd finally accepted something. Dad had never only hidden things from me, he'd hidden them from everyone. Tuesday morning, my assistant knocked. "Ashley, there's someone downstairs asking for you." "Who?" He wouldn't give his name. I looked through the lobby cameras. Dad. Again. Only this time, he wasn't standing confidently with his hands behind his back. He was sitting, alone, looking at the floor. I went downstairs. He stood the moment he saw me. "I won't keep you long." "I hope not." He nodded slowly. "I made some calls." "I'm sure you did. I know about the acquisition." Silence. "I know you owned equity." I said nothing. He struggled to finish the sentence. "I didn't know." "No, you didn't," I thought. He stopped, then quietly laughed at himself. "I always believed Taylor would be the one." "I know. I was wrong." Those 3 words should have felt satisfying. Instead, they sounded empty, because they weren't an apology. They were an observation. He wasn't sorry for what he'd done. He was sorry his prediction had failed. He looked at me again. "How much?" I smiled faintly. "Does it matter?" "It might." "There it is." "What?" "The investor." He frowned. "What are you talking about? You still aren't asking how I am. You still aren't asking if I'm happy. You only want to know my value." Silence. Again. Then, very quietly, "Can you help us?" Not, "Can you forgive us? Can we talk? Can we fix this?" Just, "Can you help us?" I looked past him. Across the street, construction crews were finishing the entrance to my new building. Luxury, modern, everything I'd worked for. I reached into my purse, pulled out a business card. He looked hopeful. I handed it to him. Not a check, not an account number. "A real estate agent." He frowned. "What is this?" "The woman who sold me my apartment." His expression froze. You bought one. Yesterday. Cash." I didn't say the last word. I didn't need to. He understood anyway. For years, he'd measured success by property. Now, the daughter he'd called his worst investment owned a home outright, while his favorite investment could barely make the mortgage payment. His shoulders slowly dropped, not from exhaustion, from realization. For the first time, he wasn't comparing his daughters anymore. He was comparing his decisions, and he was finally beginning to understand which one had destroyed his family. 3 days later, Dad called again. I didn't answer. He texted, "Please." Nothing else. Just, "Please." The same man who once believed asking for help was weakness had run out of pride. The following Monday, my assistant stepped into my office. "Ashley, your father says he isn't leaving this time." I looked through the glass wall. He wasn't pacing anymore. He wasn't angry. He simply sat there, hands folded, staring at the floor. I closed my laptop. "For how long?" "Almost 3 hours." I nodded. "Tell him I'll see him." He stood the moment I entered the conference room. No expensive watch, no tailored jacket, no confident smile. Just Thomas Smith. For the first time in my life, not acting like the smartest man in the room. "I won't waste your time." "I appreciate that." He swallowed. "The bank starts foreclosure next month." I remained silent. I've sold everything I could. Silence. My business, it's gone. Silence. They're taking Taylor's house. Still, silence. Finally. He looked at me. I need your help. There it was. Not because he loved me, because there was nobody left. I slowly sat across from him. He looked relieved. He thought I was considering it. I wasn't. I simply wanted him to finish. I made mistakes. No. He frowned. You made calculations. He blinked. What? You didn't accidentally choose Taylor? You calculated. You didn't accidentally ignore me. You calculated. You didn't accidentally refinance your house. You calculated. I leaned forward. So don't call them mistakes. They were investments. The room became painfully quiet. I believed in her. I know. I still do. He looked confused. What? I believe you truly thought she'd give you everything back. His eyes slowly filled with tears. I was wrong. No. You were unlucky. He lowered his head. You don't understand. I understand perfectly. You taught me how investors think. He reached into his briefcase, pulled out several folders, mortgage statements, foreclosure notices, business debt, tax liens. He pushed them toward me. I've got nothing left. I didn't even touch them. Instead, I opened my own leather portfolio. He looked up. Hope immediately returned to his face. He genuinely thought I was about to save him. I slid a single folder across the table. He smiled. For the first time that day. I knew you'd. He stopped speaking, because it wasn't a check. The cover simply read, Smith Family Investment Report. He frowned. What is this? Open it. Slowly, he did. The first page contained a timeline. Age 16, bought my own car, family contribution dollars. He turned the page. Age 18, paid my own college tuition, family contribution dollars. Another page. Age 22, graduated debt-free while working 30 hours a week, family contribution dollars. Another. Age 24, saved my own down payment, family contribution dollars. Another. Every Christmas gift I'd paid for, every tax return I'd prepared for free, every weekend I'd spent helping him organize company finances, every time I'd helped Taylor fix another financial disaster, hundreds of hours, years, sacrifices, all listed. Precisely, exactly the way he would have done it. He kept turning pages, faster now. Then, he reached the last one. Only one sentence filled the page. Total return received $0.0. His hands began to shake. Ashley, I calmly closed the folder. You spent 24 years measuring my value by return. I looked him directly in the eyes. So I decided to calculate yours. He opened his mouth. Nothing came out. You know what I found? Silence. The only investment that never paid off, I gently pushed the folder back toward him, was yours. He broke. Not loudly, not dramatically. His shoulders simply collapsed. I destroyed my family. I didn't answer. Because for the first time, he hadn't blamed the economy, the market, Taylor, me, the bank. He'd blamed himself. I can never fix this. No. Another silence. I don't deserve another chance. No. Tears rolled down his face. Real tears. I thought I was building something. You were. What? A balance sheet. Not a family. When I stood, he instinctively reached toward me, just like he had outside my office months earlier. Ashley, please. I stopped beside the door. Without turning around, I said quietly, You once told everyone. John Hammond sign off. Good investors know when to stop wasting money. I finally looked back. I listened. Then I walked away. Taylor lost the house 6 weeks later. The foreclosure sale barely covered the debt. She disappeared from social media. The sponsorships never returned. The friends who once filled her parties stopped answering her calls. Mom sold the family home, the same house she'd refinanced, believing she was securing Taylor's future. She called me every Sunday for almost 3 months. I answered once. She cried before saying hello. I should have protected you. I closed my eyes. I know. It was the first honest conversation we'd ever had. It was also the shortest. Dad accepted a management position at another construction company. Not owner, not president, employee. For the first time in over 30 years, someone else signed his paycheck. 6 months later, I finally moved into my new apartment. No photographers, no champagne, no speeches, just me, a moving company, and a small wooden plaque I'd ordered weeks earlier. I hung it above the bookshelf in my office. Simple, elegant, exactly where I'd see it every morning. It read, "Best investment I ever made." Not because of the money, not because of the apartment, because for the first time in my life, I'd stopped trying to earn the love of people who had already decided my value, and that turned out to be the greatest return I would ever receive.